The air in the Northwood General Emergency Room was a toxic cocktail. It smelled of antiseptic, stale coffee, and the faint, metallic tang of blood. Fluorescent lights hummed a weary, incessant tune overhead, casting a sterile, unforgiving glare on the scuffed linoleum floors. It was a symphony of controlled chaos, a place of constant, frantic motion. Beeping monitors provided the rhythm, hurried footsteps the percussion, and strained, urgent voices the melody. For most, it was a high-stakes environment. For Nurse Alara Vance, it was a place to hide. She moved through the chaos like a ghost, a pale figure in ill-fitting blue scrubs, her shoulders perpetually slumped as if carrying an invisible weight. Her hands, which had once field-sutured a chest wound in the back of a bucking helicopter under enemy fire, now trembled as she tried to insert an IV line into the arm of a dehydrated college student. The needle hovered, slick with sweat from her palm. She missed the vein. The student winced. Alara flinched, whispering an apology that was barely audible over the din. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Let me try again." Her voice was a wisp of sound, easily lost. Across the bay, Nurse Brenda, a woman whose seniority was matched only by her disdain for newcomers, watched with a predatory smirk. She nudged a younger nurse, Chloe. "Look at her. It's like she's never seen a needle before. How did she even pass her exams?" Chloe had the decency to look away, her expression a mix of pity and discomfort. She liked Alara, in a distant, cautious way. The quiet nurse always took the worst assignments without complaint, and always had a kind word, even if it was whispered. But defending her meant drawing the ire of Brenda, and worse, of him. And then, he arrived. Dr. Alistair Finch, chief of trauma surgery, swept into the ER not like a doctor, but like a king entering his court. His tailored suit was immaculate, a stark contrast to the functional scrubs of everyone else. His shoes clicked with an arrogant rhythm on the floor tiles. He radiated an aura of brilliant, untouchable authority. His eyes, the color of cold steel, scanned the room, missing nothing, judging everything. And they landed, as they so often did, on Alara. He glided over to her station, his presence sucking the air out of the immediate vicinity. "Nurse Vance." The name dripped from his tongue like poison. "Are we having trouble with a simple intravenous cannulation? A task, I might add, that first-year medical students master in an afternoon." Alara's head bowed lower. Her mousy brown hair fell across her face, a curtain she desperately wished she could hide behind forever. I missed the vein, doctor. I was just about to try again." Finch let out a short, derisive laugh. It was a sound that made everyone nearby flinch. "You were about to try again. How inspiring. Perhaps you should try to find a career that doesn't involve the health and safety of other human beings." He reached over, not to help, but to snatch the IV catheter from her hand. As he did, his elbow deliberately knocked a tray of sterile supplies from her cart. Gauze, saline vials, and syringes clattered across the floor. A collective gasp went through the nearby staff, followed by a dead, awkward silence. Brenda covered her mouth, but her eyes were dancing with cruel amusement. Chloe's face was pale with second-hand humiliation. "Clean that up," Finch commanded, his voice low and dangerous. He turned to the student. "Forgive the incompetence. We have a rather generous hiring policy for the emotionally fragile." Without another glance at Alara, he expertly slid the needle into the student's arm, taped it down, and adjusted the drip rate in under 10 seconds. He was brilliant. And he was a monster. Alara knelt, her cheeks burning with a familiar, hot shame. Her hands shook as she picked up the scattered supplies, her gaze fixed on the floor. She wore long sleeves, always, even under the warm hospital lights. They covered the faint, silvery lines of a scar that snaked around her left forearm, a permanent reminder of a life she had fought so hard to leave behind. A life where her hands had never, ever trembled. As she gathered the last of the mess, her fingers brushed against the worn leather of her boots, the only part of her old uniform she couldn't bear to part with. They were a secret anchor in a world that was trying to drown her. The rest of the shift passed in a blur of quiet drudgery. Alara was assigned to restocking, to cleaning beds, to transporting non-critical patients. She was kept away from anyone who required actual medical intervention. She was a ghost, a pariah. She ate her lunch alone in a small, forgotten break room. The silence, a welcome reprieve from the whispers and mocking glances. She just had to get through the day. Then the week. Then the year. Eventually, she hoped, the memories would fade, and this quiet, anonymous life would become her reality. She wouldn't be Angel anymore. She would just be Alara, the clumsy nurse nobody noticed. That was the plan. But plans have a way of shattering. The first sign was a change in the sound of the city. The distant drone of traffic was suddenly punctuated by a cascade of sirens, dozens of them, all converging on Northwood General. Then the radios crackled to life. A section of the I-5 overpass had collapsed during rush hour. A multi-vehicle pileup, mass casualties. The ER exploded. The controlled chaos became pure, unadulterated pandemonium. Doctors and nurses moved with a desperate urgency. The doors flew open again and again, admitting a tide of broken bodies and terrified faces. Finch was in his element, a conductor orchestrating a symphony of trauma care. He barked orders, made split-second decisions, his arrogance momentarily eclipsed by his sheer competence. Amidst the flood of victims, one gurney was wheeled in that was different. The man on it was unconscious, his face a mask of blood and grime. He had no identification. His clothes were rugged, tactical-looking, but torn to shreds. He was listed on the intake form with 2 words, John Doe. Finch gave the man a cursory glance. He saw the severe head trauma, the distended abdomen suggesting internal bleeding, the multiple compound fractures. He also saw the man's unkempt appearance, the dirt under his fingernails. He made an assumption. Another homeless guy caught in the wrong place, he declared to his team. Standard head trauma protocol. Get him to CT, but prioritize the others, the ones we can actually save. Bay 4 for now, and keep him out of my way. He turned his attention to a well-dressed man with a comparatively minor chest contusion, a local politician who had been in the pileup. Finch saw status. He saw a potential hospital donor. He saw a more valuable use of his time. The John Doe was pushed to the periphery, a problem to be dealt with later, or not at all. It was a death sentence, delivered with a casual wave of the hand. The task of moving the John Doe fell, predictably, to Alara. Brenda shoved the chart into her hands. Finch wants this one out of the main bay. Take him down to the observation ward, and try not to drop him. Alara nodded silently, her heart sinking. The observation ward was where patients went to wait. Sometimes they waited to get better. Sometimes they waited to die. She wheeled the gurney into a small, curtained-off alcove, preparing to transfer him. The man was completely still, his breathing shallow and ragged. She began her routine check, her movements slow and methodical, just as she had been taught in her nursing orientation. Vitals, pupil response, checking for obvious wounds. But then, habit gave way to instinct. The muscle memory from thousands of hours in combat zones, a part of her she had tried to bury, began to stir. Her fingers, moving over his collarbone to check for fractures, paused. There. A tiny puncture mark, almost invisible amidst the scrapes and bruises, just below the clavicle. It was neat, precise. Too precise for wreckage. Her eyes narrowed. She leaned closer, her senses suddenly sharp, cutting through the fog of her anxiety. The antiseptic smell of the hospital was gone. In her mind, she was back in the dust and heat of Kandahar, the air thick with the smell of cordite and ozone. She had seen a wound like this before. She gently lifted the man's eyelid. His pupil was sluggish, but as she watched, she saw it. A flicker. An almost imperceptible nystagmoid twitch. Her blood ran cold. It wasn't just head trauma. It wasn't internal bleeding. It was a toxin. A fast-acting, organophosphate-based neurotoxin. The head trauma was secondary, maybe even a smokescreen. The standard treatment for his other injuries, especially certain anesthetics and paralytics, would interact with the poison. It wouldn't just fail to help, it would accelerate the process, shutting down his respiratory system in minutes. He didn't have hours. He had minutes. Without thinking, she strode out of the alcove, her posture straighter, her walk filled with a purpose that hadn't been there seconds before. She saw Finch overseeing the care of the politician. "Dr. Finch," she said. Her voice was clear, steady. It didn't waver. Finch turned, an annoyed expression on his face. "What is it, Vance? Did you get lost on your way to the morgue?" "The John Doe in Bay 4, she said, ignoring the jibe. "He's been poisoned. A neurotoxin. We need to administer pralidoxime and atropine immediately. All other treatments must stop." Finch stared at her. For a moment, he was speechless. Then he threw his head back and laughed. It was a loud, cruel, booming sound that echoed through the ER. "Poisoned? Nurse Vance, have you been reading thriller novels on your shift again? He was in a bridge collapse. He has a catastrophic brain injury. He is not the victim of some fanciful assassination plot." "The puncture wound on his clavicle, the nystagmus, the specific quality of his breathing. It's not consistent with simple trauma," Alara insisted, her voice gaining strength. "It's classic organophosphate poisoning. The protocol for his other injuries will kill him." Finch's amusement vanished, replaced by a cold fury. He stepped toward her, his face a mask of rage. "You are a junior nurse. You are barely qualified to change a bedpan. You will not question my diagnosis. You will not tell me how to do my job. Now get back to your patient and do as you were told. Move him out of my trauma bay. That is a direct order." For the first time all day, Alara looked him directly in the eye. The timid, frightened woman was gone. In her place was someone else, someone with eyes as hard and cold as Finch's own. The years of forced meekness, of swallowing insults, of hiding from her own shadow, it all burned away in a single, silent moment of decision. She had run from who she was because she was afraid of the death she had caused, but she would not stand by and watch an innocent man die because of another's ego. "No," she said. The word was quiet, but it landed with the force of a physical blow. "No, doctor, I will not." Before Finch or anyone else could react, she spun on her heel and moved with a speed that was shocking. She ran to the nearest crash cart, her hands flying across the drawers, her mind a blur of calculations. She knew exactly what she needed. She grabbed a vial of pralidoxime and 2 pre-filled syringes of atropine, the antidote. "Security!" Finch roared, his face turning a blotchy red. "Someone stop her!" But Alara was already back in the alcove with the John Doe. She slammed the heavy privacy curtain shut and, with a strength no one would have believed she possessed, dragged a heavy supply cabinet in front of it, blocking the entrance. She heard shouting, the pounding of fists on the other side. She ignored it all. Her focus was absolute. The patient was on the brink. His breathing was becoming more shallow, his heart rate plummeting on the portable monitor. She worked with a fluid, terrifying efficiency. The trembling hands were gone, replaced by the steady, practiced movements of an expert. She snapped the top off the pralidoxime vial, drew the correct dosage into a syringe, and found a vein in his arm on the first try, the needle sliding in with surgical precision. She pushed the first dose. Then she administered the atropine, one syringe, then the next, watching the monitor with an eagle's focus. "Come on," she whispered, not to the man, but to herself. It was a prayer and a command. Stay with me, soldier." Outside, the chaos escalated. Finch was screaming, unhinged. "She's lost her mind. She's trying to kill him. Get that door open, now!" The sound of heavy boots arrived. Hospital security. "Ma'am, you need to open this door right now," a guard yelled. Alara ignored him. She watched the monitor. The patient's heart rate, which had dropped into the 40s, flickered. It stabilized. Then it began to climb. 50, 60, 75. His breathing deepened, the ragged gasps smoothing into a more regular rhythm. It was working. The antidote was working. A loud crack echoed through the small space as security used a tool to break the lock on the supply cabinet. The cabinet was shoved aside, and the curtain was ripped open. 2 burly security guards stood there, stunned by the scene. Behind them, his face purple with rage, was Dr. Finch. "Get away from him!" Finch shrieked. He lunged forward and physically shoved Alara, sending her stumbling backward. She tripped over a discarded piece of equipment and fell hard against the wall, her head cracking against the tile. For a moment, the room spun. Finch leaned over the patient, ready to reverse whatever she had done. But even he couldn't ignore the evidence on the monitor. The man's vitals were dramatically, inexplicably improving. He was stable. Confused and furious, Finch turned back to Alara, who was pushing herself up, a trickle of blood running from a cut on her hairline. "You're finished," he spat, his voice trembling with venom. He was holding his phone. "I have the hospital CEO on the line. You are fired, Vance. Your nursing license will be revoked. You will be charged with assault and reckless endangerment. Security, get her out of my hospital, now." The guards hesitated, looking from the stabilized patient to the enraged doctor. But the order had come from the chief of surgery. They grabbed Alara's arms. She didn't resist. The fire in her had been replaced by a deep, weary cold. She had done the right thing. She had saved him. But it had cost her everything she had tried to build. They dragged her through the ER. Her colleagues, the ones who had mocked her and the ones who had pitied her, all stared in shocked silence. Brenda had a look of triumphant vindication. Chloe looked like she was about to be sick. As they passed the main desk, one of the guards roughly ripped her ID badge from the collar of her scrubs and tossed it on the counter. She was officially an outcast. They didn't stop until they had pushed her through the glass doors of the emergency exit and out into the night. A cold, miserable rain had begun to fall, plastering her thin scrubs to her skin. The doors hissed shut behind her, leaving her alone in the darkness. She stood there, shivering, watching the flashing lights of the ambulances paint the wet asphalt in strokes of red and white. She was fired. She was disgraced. And she was utterly alone. She had failed. She had run from her past, only to have it destroy her future. With a heart heavier than she had ever known, she turned and began to walk away from the hospital, with no destination in mind. The sound started as a low, deep thrumming, a vibration she felt in her chest before she heard it with her ears. It grew rapidly, a rhythmic whump, whump, whump that was utterly alien to the urban soundscape. It wasn't the high-pitched whine of a news chopper or the familiar buzz of a medevac. This was a deeper, more menacing sound, a sound that belonged to war zones and covert operations, a sound she knew in her bones. She looked up. Descending from the dark, rain-swept clouds were two helicopters. They were sleek, black, and angular, devoid of any markings save for the faint, gray outline of a number on the tail. MH-60 Blackhawks. They weren't landing at the hospital's helipad. They were coming down in the street, right in front of the ER entrance, their powerful rotor wash blasting cars, scattering loose debris, and sending terrified pedestrians running for cover. From her position down the block, Alara watched in stunned disbelief. This was impossible. This couldn't be happening. Thick ropes dropped from the open doors of both choppers, and figures clad in black tactical gear rappelled down with breathtaking speed. They hit the pavement, weapons at the ready, and formed a perimeter with practiced, lethal efficiency. They moved like a pack of wolves, a single, coordinated entity. The main doors to the ER slid open as a patient was being discharged. The Special Forces team didn't hesitate. They stormed the entrance, their sudden, overwhelming presence bringing the entire emergency room to a screeching halt. The shouting, the beeping, the frantic motion, it all died in an instant, replaced by a thick, terrified silence. The team leader, a master sergeant with a face that looked like it was carved from granite and a constellation of old scars on his neck, stepped forward. His eyes, hidden behind ballistic glasses, swept the room. He wasn't looking for a doctor. He wasn't there to declare a national emergency. His voice was a low growl that cut through the silence. "We're looking for someone," he announced. "We're looking for a woman. Codename Angel." A wave of confusion rippled through the staff. Nurses and doctors exchanged bewildered glances. Angel? Who was Angel? Finch, who had been preening, enjoying the aftermath of his victory over Alara, stepped forward with an air of self-importance. "I am Dr. Alistair Finch, chief of this department. Who are you, and what is the meaning of this intrusion?" The Master Sergeant ignored him completely, his eyes still scanning the faces in the room. "She was here. Our intel says she was here. Where is she?" His voice was laced with an urgency that bordered on desperation. "Where is Angel?" Chloe, the young nurse, her face pale, timidly raised a hand. "Sir, there's no one here by that name. No doctors, no nurses." The soldier's jaw tightened. She might be using a different name. She saved a man's life, a John Doe, Within the last hour, she defied a direct order to do it. Every eye in the room suddenly swiveled to Finch. His smug expression had vanished, replaced by a dawning horror. He knew exactly who the soldier was talking about. He was talking about the mousy, incompetent nurse he had just fired and humiliated. He was talking about Alara Vance. Meanwhile, Alara was still walking, her mind a numb buzz of failure and despair. The rain was coming down harder now, soaking her to the bone. She heard the screech of tires and looked up, blinded by a pair of headlights. A black, government-issue SUV had pulled up alongside her, cutting her off. The passenger door flew open. The master sergeant from the ER got out. He stood in the pouring rain, not seeming to notice it, his intense gaze fixed on her. He looked her up and down, the drenched scrubs, the cut on her head, the look of utter defeat in her eyes. A flicker of recognition, then relief, washed over his harsh features. "Angel?" he asked, his voice softer now, but still a low growl. "Is that you?" Alara froze. No one had called her that in 5 years. Not since the day she had traded her flight suit for civilian clothes and her call sign for a name she barely recognized. Hearing it now was like a punch to the gut. It was a name that belonged to a ghost. "We've been looking for you," the soldier said. "The man you saved. That's Captain Marcus Thorne. Delta. He's one of ours. He's the mission." He paused, his eyes softening with something that looked like awe. "You saved his life, Angel. The doctors were going to kill him. We heard everything on comms. We need you. He needs you." Alara stared at him, the rain dripping from her hair into her eyes. Captain Thorne. Delta. The pieces clicked into place with sickening clarity. The tactical clothes. The precise nature of the wound. He wasn't a vagrant. He was a soldier. And she hadn't just saved a patient, she had saved an asset. "Let's go," the master sergeant said gently. "We need to get you back inside." He guided her into the warm, dry interior of the SUV. As they sped back toward the hospital, he spoke into his radio. "Talon 1, this is Saber. We have the package. I repeat, we have Angel." Back in the ER, the standoff was reaching a boiling point. Finch, trying to regain control, was blustering about hospital policy and patient rights. The soldiers ignored him, their focus on the entrance. Then, the doors slid open again. Alara walked in. She was flanked by the master sergeant and 2 other commandos, a small, drenched figure surrounded by giants in black tactical gear. Her hair was wet, a bandage was now taped hastily over the cut on her head, and she was wrapped in a black military jacket that was far too big for her. But she wasn't slumping anymore. Her back was straight. Her eyes, though weary, were clear and focused. Finch saw her and let out a scoff of pure disbelief. "Security! I told you to get this woman off the premises. She is a disturbed individual who assaulted a patient. She is a danger to—" His tirade was cut short by the arrival of another man. This one wore no tactical gear. He was older, in his late 50s, with silver hair and the crisp, decorated uniform of a 3-star general in the United States Army. Stars on his shoulder glittered under the fluorescent lights. He strode into the ER with an air of absolute, unquestionable authority that made Dr. Finch's power seem like a child's tantrum. The general's eyes, cold and sharp, scanned the scene and landed on Finch. "Are you Dr. Alistair Finch?" he asked. His voice was calm, but it held the chilling promise of immense power. "I am," Finch said, puffing out his chest, trying to project an authority he no longer possessed. "And you are—" "You, Doctor, are relieved," the general said, cutting him off. He pointed a finger at Finch, and it felt like the barrel of a gun. "As of this moment, you will have no further contact with the patient known as John Doe. You will not access his medical records. You will not enter his room. In fact, you will not come within 50 feet of him. Am I clear?" Finch was sputtering, his face a kaleidoscope of confusion and fury. "On whose authority? This is my hospital. That patient is my responsibility." The general turned his gaze to Alara. His expression softened, almost imperceptibly. "That patient is a captain in the United States Army Special Operations Command," he said, his voice ringing through the silent room. "And his care is now the sole responsibility of this woman." He gestured to Alara. Staff Sergeant Alara Vance is in command of all medical decisions regarding Captain Thorne. Her orders will be followed without question or delay. This is no longer a civilian matter. This is a matter of national security. He turned back to the stunned, speechless Dr. Finch. And her name is not Vance, it's Angel. And you, Doctor, are in a world of trouble. The general, whose name was Harding, wasted no time. He, Alara, and the Master Sergeant, whose name was Riggs, convened in a hastily secured conference room. On the table, a satellite link was already established, projecting schematics and data onto a portable screen. Captain Thorne was on a deep cover operation in a hostile nation, Harding began, his tone grave. He secured intel on a new, weaponized neurotoxin, codenamed Chimera. It's airborne, fast-acting, and has no known cure. He was compromised during exfiltration and deliberately exposed. He managed to self-administer a prototype universal blocker, but it only slowed the toxin's progress. It didn't stop it. Alara listened, her mind processing the information with the cold, detached clarity of her past life. The pralidoxime and atropine I gave him. It's a standard nerve agent countermeasure. It's buying him time by treating the symptoms, but it won't neutralize the core agent if it's a novel compound. Exactly, Harding confirmed, nodding with respect. You bought him critical time. The intel Thorne secured isn't just a report. It's the molecular key to the antidote. He has it stored on a biocompatible microdrive implanted beneath his skin. The problem is, the Chimera toxin is corrosive to the drive's casing. It's degrading. We have a few hours, maybe less, before the data is corrupted and Thorne's system is overwhelmed. A cold dread settled in Alara's stomach. This was worse than she imagined. It wasn't just about saving one man's life. It was about preventing a weapon of mass destruction from being unleashed without a cure. We need to get the drive out. It's a simple surgical procedure, but we need a sterile environment. Which we no longer have, Riggs growled from the corner of the room. The fact that Finch was so quick to write him off. It's too convenient. It feels dirty. As if on cue, a communications tech entered the room, his face grim. General, sir. We flagged a call made from Dr. Finch's personal cell phone about 30 minutes before Captain Thorne arrived. It was an encrypted call to a satellite phone number we've traced to a known broker for the SVR. The room went dead silent. The SVR, the Foreign Intelligence Service of the Russian Federation. The same state actor behind the Chimera program. He wasn't just arrogant, Alara whispered, the pieces falling into place. He was paid. He was contacted ahead of time. He was told to expect a John Doe and to make sure he didn't survive. Harding's face was grim. Finch is not just a corrupt doctor. He's an enemy combatant, and he just sold this hospital out. They immediately moved Thorne to a private room in the ICU, posting a guard of 2 heavily armed soldiers outside the door. Alara stayed by his side, monitoring his vitals, which were holding steady for now thanks to her intervention. The atmosphere was thick with tension. The hospital, once a sanctuary, now felt like a trap. Every unfamiliar face in the hallway was a potential threat. Finch, meanwhile, was cornered and desperate. He knew the military's arrival meant his deal had gone sideways. His SVR contact had called him again, furious. The deal had changed. It was no longer about letting the patient die. It was now about active elimination. And if Finch failed, the consequences would be severe. Not just for his career, but for his life. Using his high-level credentials, which hadn't yet been revoked by the panicked hospital administration, he accessed the employee database. He found a new hire, a lab technician scheduled for an evening shift, a young man with no family in the city, a perfect patsy. Finch met him in the parking garage, and with a combination of threats and a briefcase full of cash, he gave the man his instructions and a new ID badge that would grant him access to the ICU. The technician was given a syringe filled with potassium chloride, a substance that would induce cardiac arrest and be almost untraceable in a patient with Thorne's complex medical issues. Up in the ICU, Alara was checking the IV drip bags. She was exhausted, running on pure adrenaline, but her senses were firing on all cylinders. The door opened, and a young man in a lab tech's coat entered, holding a tray with several vials. "I'm here for the blood draw on the John Doe," he said, his voice a little too high, his eyes avoiding contact. The soldiers at the door had let him in. He had the right credentials. He looked harmless. But Alara saw the details. The tiny beads of sweat on his upper lip, the way he held the tray with white-knuckled tension, and the syringe. It wasn't a vacuum-sealed blood collection tube. It was a standard 10 cubic centimeter syringe, the kind used for injections, not for draws. "Leave the tray on the counter," Alara said, her voice calm and even. She moved to stand between the technician and Captain Thorne's bed. "I'll handle the draw myself. We're keeping a strict contamination protocol." The tech hesitated. Panic flashed in his eyes. "No, my orders were to do it myself." He took a step forward. He was reaching for the syringe. Alara moved. It wasn't a thought. It was a pure reflex honed by years of close-quarters combat training. Her movement was a blur of explosive speed. She grabbed the technician's right wrist with one hand, twisting it inward, controlling the hand with the syringe. With her other hand, she delivered a sharp, precise palm heel strike to the side of his neck, hitting the brachial plexus. The man's entire arm went numb. He yelped in pain and surprise, his fingers going limp. The syringe clattered to the floor. Alara didn't stop. She spun him around, using his own momentum against him, and slammed him face first into the wall. She wrenched his arm up behind his back in a compliance hold that brought a scream of agony from his lips. Crack! A sickening snap echoed in the quiet room as she applied a final, sharp pressure, dislocating his shoulder to ensure he was no longer a threat. The technician slumped to the ground, sobbing in pain. The two soldiers burst into the room, weapons raised, stunned by the sudden violence. They saw the weeping technician on the floor, the syringe of potassium chloride near his feet, and Alara standing over him, breathing heavily, her face a mask of cold, lethal focus. The mousy nurse was gone. This was Angel. Riggs appeared in the doorway, his own weapon drawn. He took in the scene at a glance. "Report!" he barked. "Assassin," Alara said, her voice tight, posing as a lab tech. He was going for a direct injection. Riggs looked at the neutralized man, then at Alara, and a slow, impressed grin spread across his face. "Damn, Angel, you still got it." He keyed his radio. "Talon 1, this is Saber. The nest is compromised. I repeat, the nest is compromised. Finch sent a cleaner. We need to bug out. Now." General Harding's voice came back instantly. "Roger that, Saber. Extraction plan Delta is a go. Get to the roof. Chopper is 5 minutes out. We're taking this off the grid." The escape was a whirlwind of frantic, coordinated action. The soldiers disconnected Thorne from the hospital's stationary monitors, switching him to a portable, military-grade life support unit. They bundled him onto a tactical gurney. Alara moved with them, a vital part of the team, calling out instructions, monitoring Thorne's vitals on the move. They bypassed the main elevators, taking a secure service elevator to the roof. As the doors opened, the roar of an approaching Blackhawk washed over them. The helicopter didn't land. It hovered, its skids just feet from the edge of the roof. The team loaded Thorne's gurney aboard with practice speed. Alara jumped in right behind him, never taking her eyes off her patient. As the Blackhawk lifted off, banking sharply over the glittering city, Alara looked down at the hospital, a place that had been her prison and her sanctuary. It was now a compromised battleground she was leaving behind. The first phase of the fight was over. Now, they were heading into the wilderness, where the real war for Captain Thorne's life, and the data he carried, would be fought. There would be no more hiding. There was only the mission. The chopper flew low and fast, skimming over treetops, its lights out, a ghost in the night sky. They were headed for a place that didn't exist on any map. A decommissioned Cold War-era listening post deep in the Cascade Mountains, refitted as a secure, off-grid safe house. It was isolated, fortified, and had a fully stocked underground medical bay. It was their last, best hope. During the flight, Alara worked tirelessly in the cramped cabin, the red glow of the interior lights casting long shadows. She was no longer just a nurse. She was a combat flight medic again. With Riggs helping, she performed a small, precise surgical procedure in the back of the vibrating helicopter, inserting a central line to allow for more effective administration of the cocktail of drugs keeping Thorne alive. Her hands were rock steady, her focus absolute. When they finally landed on a hidden pad carved into the mountainside, the safe house was ready. A small team of support personnel met them, guiding them down a reinforced tunnel into the bunker. The air underground was cool and smelled of damp concrete and electronics. The medical bay was small, but state-of-the-art, a sterile white room in the heart of the mountain. They transferred Thorne to a bed, and for the first time in hours, Alara could take a breath. General Harding was on a secure video link, his face etched with concern. "What's his status, Angel?" "He's holding, but barely," Alara reported, studying the monitors. "The toxin is adapting to the countermeasures. His cell saturation is dropping. The microdrive's casing is degrading faster than we anticipated. We have to get it out of him, General. I can do the extraction, but I need to stabilize him first. I need another hour, maybe 2. "You have it," Harding said. "But be advised, we're not in the clear. Finch is in the wind. He slipped out of the hospital right after the assassination attempt failed. He knows he's burned, which makes him unpredictable. He gave the SVR cell your description and a likely trajectory. They know we went airborne. They'll be hunting us." As if to punctuate his words, an alarm blared through the bunker, a shrill, insistent beep. A tech's voice came over the intercom, tight with panic. "Sir, we have incoming. 3 vehicles, unmarked, moving fast up the access road. They're not ours." Riggs cursed, grabbing his rifle. Finch must have had a tracker on the ambulance that brought Thorne in. He gave them the general area. They're canvassing. They found us. He looked at Alara. "How many men do we have?" 6, including you," Alara answered without looking up from her patient. Her mind was already split between 2 battlefields, the microscopic war inside Thorne's body and the physical one about to erupt outside. 6 against a dedicated kill team, Riggs muttered. He turned to his men. "Lock it down. Fortify the entrance. No one gets through." The next hour was a blur of desperate preparation. Above ground, Riggs and his small team set up defensive positions, planting claymores along the narrow access road. Below ground, Alara worked with a frenetic intensity, a scientist racing against the clock. She analyzed Thorne's blood chemistry, adjusting drug dosages, fighting the poison molecule by molecule. She was pushing his system to the very edge, trying to find a delicate balance that would allow him to survive the surgery. The first explosion rocked the bunker, sending a tremor through the concrete floor. Dust sifted from the ceiling. The firefight had begun. The sound of automatic weapons fire, a brutal staccato rhythm, echoed down the tunnel. "Status!" Alara yelled into her headset, her eyes never leaving the monitor. "We're engaged," Riggs's voice crackled back, strained over the sound of gunfire. "They're pros, at least a dozen of them. They're trying to flank us. How's our boy?" "He's as stable as he's going to get," she shouted back. "I'm starting the extraction now." With the sounds of a raging battle just a few hundred feet away, Alara Vance began to operate. She draped the area on Thorne's chest, sterilized her instruments, and made the first incision. Her world shrank to the small, illuminated circle of flesh under her hands. The chaos outside faded into a dull roar. There was only the patient, the scalpel, and the mission. She worked with the precision of a master jeweler, dissecting layers of tissue, searching for the small metallic object. Another explosion, closer this time, shook the room violently. A tray of instruments crashed to the floor. Alara didn't even flinch. "They've breached the outer door!" a soldier's voice yelled over the comms. "They're in the tunnel!" "Fall back to the medbay door," Riggs commanded. "Buy her time. That's the only thing that matters." Alara's fingers found it. A small, flat disc, no bigger than a thumbnail, warm to the touch. The microdrive. She carefully worked it free from the surrounding tissue. As she lifted it out, she saw that the casing was pitted and corroded. It was glowing with a faint, ominous heat. It wouldn't have lasted another 30 minutes. "I have it," she said into her headset, her voice calm and steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. "The package is secure." At that exact moment, the reinforced door to the medical bay shuddered under a massive impact. A shaped charge. The enemy was right outside. "Angel, get down!" Riggs screamed. The door blew inward in a deafening blast of fire and shrapnel. Alara threw herself over Thorne's body, shielding him with her own, the precious microdrive clutched in her fist. Smoke and dust filled the room. Through the ringing in her ears, she heard the screams of wounded men and the terrifying sound of enemy soldiers entering the bay. The firefight was now at point-blank range. Riggs and his 2 remaining men were backed into a corner, laying down suppressing fire. But they were outnumbered and outgunned. One of the soldiers went down, a cry of pain cut short. Then the other. Riggs was alone, crouched behind an overturned gurney, reloading his rifle. An enemy mercenary, clad in black, stepped through the smoke, his rifle leveled. He didn't see Riggs. He saw Alara rising from behind the operating table. He saw a nurse, a soft target. He smiled. It was the last thing he ever did. Alara moved with a predator's grace. She had the microdrive safely tucked away. Now she had a new objective: survive. She grabbed a heavy stainless steel surgical tray and hurled it like a discus. It caught the mercenary square in the face, stunning him for a crucial second. In that second, she closed the distance. She didn't have a weapon, so she became one. She slammed the heel of her boot into his knee, shattering the joint. As he screamed and buckled, she drove her elbow into his throat, crushing his windpipe. He fell, gurgling, and didn't get up. Another mercenary charged into the room. This one saw what happened and didn't hesitate, raising his weapon. From the corner, Riggs fired, his shot taking the man in the chest. But a third soldier appeared in the doorway, his aim fixed on Riggs. "Riggs!" Alara screamed. Riggs spun, but he was too late. The mercenary fired a 3-round burst. 2 shots hit Riggs in his body armor, knocking the wind out of him. The third caught him in the thigh. He went down hard, his rifle clattering away from him. The mercenary advanced, his weapon trained on the wounded master sergeant. It was over. But he had forgotten about the nurse. While his attention was on Riggs, Alara had scooped up the rifle from the first man she had taken down. She wasn't a stranger to the weapon. She had trained with it, cleaned it, and used it. She flipped the safety off, shouldered the rifle, and acquired a sight picture in less than a heartbeat. 2 shots. Crack, crack. They were perfect. Center mass. The mercenary jerked, a look of utter shock on his face, and then collapsed in a heap. Silence descended on the medical bay, broken only by the groaning of the wounded Riggs and the steady beeping of Thorne's monitor. Alara stood in the center of the room, breathing heavily, holding the assault rifle, surrounded by smoke and bodies. She had saved the data. She had saved her patient. And she had just become a soldier again. Reinforcements, alerted by a distress signal from the bunker, arrived minutes later, swarming the mountain and securing the site. They found 2 more mercenaries on their way to the medbay and neutralized them. In the aftermath, they also found him, Dr. Alistair Finch. He hadn't been with the assault team. He was waiting in a car a mile down the access road, listening to the battle on a radio, waiting for confirmation of the kill. He was taken into custody without a fight, a pathetic, trembling man whose arrogance had finally led him to ruin. The scene shifted. The smoke-filled bunker was replaced by the polished lobby of Northwood General Hospital 24 hours later. A chaotic press conference was in full swing. The hospital's CEO, a man named Henderson, was at a podium, trying desperately to control the narrative. Dr. Finch was a troubled but brilliant surgeon, he said, his voice slick with false sincerity. It appears he was manipulated by a deeply unstable nurse, Alara Vance, whose erratic and violent behavior culminated in this tragic series of events. Our hospital was, in essence, a victim. He was cut off as the main doors to the lobby flew open. Every camera and every head turned. General Harding entered, flanked by a phalanx of uniformed military police. Between them, in a wheelchair being pushed by Master Sergeant Riggs, who had a bandage on his thigh but a triumphant look on his face, was Captain Marcus Thorne. He was weak, but he was awake, and he was alive. And walking beside him, her head held high, was Alara. She was clean now, dressed in a simple black pantsuit provided by the army. She looked poised, confident. She looked nothing like the timid nurse who had been dragged out of this same building just a day before. General Harding walked directly to the podium, displacing the flabbergasted CEO as if he were a piece of furniture. "You'll forgive the interruption," Harding said into the microphones, his voice booming through the lobby. "But I feel a need to correct the record." He looked out at the sea of reporters. "The woman you see here, Alara Vance, is not unstable. She is not a criminal. She is a hero. She is a decorated former Air Force pararescueman who saved the life of a vital national asset and single-handedly protected intelligence critical to the security of this nation. The troubled surgeon, Dr. Finch, was in fact a paid agent of a hostile foreign power who attempted murder for money." A wave of gasps and frantic typing filled the room. Harding wasn't finished. As for his claims, he continued, his voice dripping with contempt, perhaps this will clarify things. He signaled to an aide, who connected a device to the sound system. Finch's voice, laced with greed and malice, filled the lobby. It was a recording of his call with the SVR broker, recovered from the mercenaries' radio. "The price is $10 million, Finch's voice said. "For that, I guarantee that John Doe never leaves the hospital alive. Consider it done." The recording ended. The silence that followed was absolute. CEO Henderson looked like he had seen a ghost. His career was over, and he knew it. In the back of the room, 2 plainclothes federal agents were quietly placing a stunned Dr. Finch, who had been brought in for the spectacle, in handcuffs. His face, once the picture of arrogant authority, was now a mask of pure, pathetic despair. He started to weep, babbling about a setup, about how it was all a lie. His protests were ignored as he was led away, his downfall complete and public. General Harding looked back at Alara. "And one more thing," he said, his voice softening. "Her name isn't just Vance. Her comrades, the men whose lives she saved time and time again, they have another name for her. They call her Angel." The room erupted, not in questions, but in applause. It started with a few reporters, then grew, a wave of spontaneous, thunderous appreciation. Chloe, the young nurse, was in the crowd, tears of joy streaming down her face. Brenda and the other nurses who had mocked Alara stood frozen, their faces burning with a shame far deeper than any Alara had ever felt. Later, in a quiet office away from the cameras, General Harding and a recovering Captain Thorne sat with Alara. The microdrive was safe, its data being decrypted by NSA specialists. "Your nursing license has been fully reinstated, with a public commendation," Harding said. "The charges have been dropped, and the board has issued a formal apology." Alara nodded. It felt distant, like it had happened to someone else. "But I don't think you'll be needing it," Harding continued, a smile touching his lips. "We're forming a new unit, a small, elite, rapid deployment team, a surgical and rescue unit specifically for high-risk special operations. It requires a unique kind of leader, someone who is as comfortable with a scalpel as they are with a rifle, someone who knows medicine and warfare. There's only one person on the planet qualified to build and lead that team." He looked her right in the eye. "The job is yours, Sergeant Vance, if you want it. No more hiding. It's time to come home." Thorne, who had been watching her intently, spoke for the first time. His voice was raspy but strong. "We need you, Angel. I need you." There was more than just professional respect in his eyes. There was gratitude, admiration, and the beginning of something more. A real smile, the first she had felt in 5 years, spread across Alara's face. It reached her eyes, chasing away the last of the shadows. "I accept, General." The final scene was not in a hospital. It was on the vast, windy tarmac of a military airbase. A massive C-17 Globemaster transport plane sat waiting, its cargo ramp lowered like a welcoming gate. Alara walked towards it. She wasn't in scrubs or a pantsuit. She was in a crisp, new flight suit, the kind she used to wear. It fit perfectly. She moved with a confidence and purpose that was breathtaking, her boots making a steady, rhythmic sound on the concrete. The weight on her shoulders was gone. Captain Thorne, now on his feet and leaning only slightly on a cane, walked beside her. "You nervous?" he asked, a playful grin on his face. "I've jumped out of planes at 20,000 feet in the middle of a thunderstorm," she replied, her own smile matching his. "This is just a walk in the park." "Good," he said, his voice warm. "Glad to have you back, Angel." "It's good to be back, Captain," she said. She reached the ramp and walked up into the cavernous interior of the plane without looking back. She was leaving her old life behind, not as a retreat, but as a triumph. She had faced her past, embraced who she was, and stepped into a future of her own making. The ramp began to rise, sealing her inside, ready to fly toward the next mission, a vindicated hero, reborn. We really hope you enjoyed this educational piece of content, and hope that you could understand the moral lessons behind it. The story of Alara Vance teaches us a powerful lesson about judging others. It shows that true strength and capability are not always visible on the surface. People who seem quiet or meek may possess incredible reserves of courage and skill, forged in experiences we can't even imagine. It's a reminder to never underestimate anyone based on their current circumstances or demeanor. Furthermore, the story highlights the importance of doing the right thing, even when it comes at a great personal cost. Ilara risked her career and her freedom to save a life, guided by her principles and her training, not by the orders of a corrupt authority figure. In the end, her integrity was her greatest asset, leading to her ultimate vindication and success. It proves that character is far more valuable than status. Doing the right thing, guided by your conscience, always pays off. So, what would you have done if you were in Ilara's shoes? Would you have followed the doctor's orders to protect your job? Or would you have risked it all to save the patient? Let me know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this story, please smash that like button, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss an upload. Your support means the world to us and helps us create more content like this. Have a nice rest of your day.